Listen to this. Oil prices have surged nearly 50% to almost $120 per barrel due to the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. The U.S. has let the sanctions waiver allowed on Russian oil purchases expire, despite the surge in oil prices. I'm Jack, and with me is Jillian. The U.S. issued an order allowing the delivery and sale of crude oil and petroleum products originating from Russia, which was set to expire midnight on Saturday. The previous waiver was described as a measure to stabilize energy markets in the aftermath of the Gulf War. The U.S.-Israeli war on Iran had led to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, a choke point controlled by Iran that carried roughly one-fifth of the world's daily oil supply. Iran has blocked the transit of ships from what it terms as non-friendly nations, a step which sent oil prices surging. The Trump administration's first waiver was in March, which was extended in April, following the expiration of the earlier waiver. The U.S. sanctions waiver had irked European allies of the U.S., who charged that the move was funding Russia's war on Ukraine through the funds received from its oil sales. Many countries, including India, which had emerged as a major buyer of Russian oil, and Indonesia had lobbied with the U.S. for a waiver, arguing that the supply disruptions caused by the Hormuz blockade had deprived a huge chunk of supplies to the global oil market, thereby effecting a huge surge in prices. More than 10 of the most vulnerable and poorest countries in terms of energy consumption had sought a waiver. The U.S. had imposed a 25% fine on India for its Russian oil purchases in August 2025, but ended it after it announced a trade deal with the South Asian country. The International Energy Agency has termed the Iran war as the biggest supply disruption in the history of the oil market. On Friday, President Donald Trump said China has agreed to buy U.S. oil, as a substantial amount of Iran's shipments continue to be blocked by Washington's naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Many U.S. lawmakers had urged the administration to end the sanctions waiver on Russia. Senators Jeanne Shaheen and Elizabeth Warren said the U.S. should finally end its ill-conceived policy of helping Russia make even more money from the reckless war in Iran. The U.S. Treasury Secretary said more than 10 of the most vulnerable and poorest countries in terms of energy consumption had sought a waiver from him.
Jillian, this reminds me of last week's deep dive into the energy crisis and how government decisions can have such a huge impact on the global market.
I'm skeptical about the government's spending and the intelligence agencies, and this just adds to my doubts. The quote from the U.S. Treasury Secretary is crazy. More than 10 of the most vulnerable and poorest countries had sought a waiver, and now the waiver has expired.
President Trump said China has agreed to buy U.S. oil, which is a big deal, but what about the impact on the global market?
The U.S. had imposed a 25% fine on India for its Russian oil purchases, but ended it after a trade deal, which is insane.
The International Energy Agency has termed the Iran war as the biggest supply disruption in the history of the oil market, which is wild.
Listen, the U.S. letting the sanctions waiver on Russian oil purchases expire is a huge deal, and we need to talk about it.
The surge in oil prices is crazy, and the impact on the global market is going to be huge.
We should share this with a friend and like the video, because this is a conversation that needs to be had.